We have car dealers around the country have been absolutely paralyzed. Nothing to do with flooding. This is a cyber attack. How hackers are demanding ransom and what that means if you want to buy a car. Next.
Gary just put a triumphant end to forced labor within his company's supply chain. Now, his only kryptonite is the office candy bowl. Save your company's operations and reputation with Exiger.
Past the hour, we want to go to this story about car dealers. We're talking about these car dealers across the country have been forced to really go old school, do all of their paperwork by hand after a cyber attack hit the company that's behind key auto software. So hackers are demanding millions of dollars in ransom from CDK Global, which is a company that serves about 15,000 dealerships in both the U.S. and Canada. Let's bring in Exiger's Senior Vice President of Supply Chains, Herz, on this story. JC, welcome back to the show. We appreciate it. So this is a big deal. You got for the people in this business, at least. I mean, how do things like this happen? Is this we talked about soft targets in our previous story in a completely different way, but is that what's happening with these auto dealerships? They don't protect themselves as well, and the hackers see them as vulnerable? Or?
Well, it's a supply chain issue. I mean, at Exiger, we look at the supply chains of lots of companies, and behind them you see some common denominators. So these are different car dealerships, different car companies, right? But they're all using this one service provider that enables, with software as a service, it enables their transactions. So there's this concentration risk that we see when we map the supply chain on these common denominators. And when these things are hit, all of their customers are affected. So you're not just buying from a car company, you're actually buying from a car company and its entire supply chain, which is what we try to illuminate in our work. And we saw it in COVID, and we see it now, whether it's pathogen or whether it's ransomware. You know, we're dependent on those second or third tier suppliers, and when they go down, everything goes down.
The hackers know that. Here's a statement from CDK in the email to dealers. At this time, we don't have an estimated time frame for resolution. Therefore, our dealer systems won't be available likely for several days. I said, you know, talked in the open, they're using pen and paper, kind of an old school way of doing it. But the impact if you hit someone like this is larger, is your point, than it would be for someone else in the chain. You know, the hackers kind of know where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the front door of the brand, right? It's right. Companies that you've never heard of in the supply chain are that critical link. And it's not just in cars, right? We saw that with healthcare. Right, with the breach of a healthcare company that's enabling all these transactions for hospitals, they had to go to paper too, and there's lives on the line there. So, you know, this is why it's so critical to understand that these supply chains are interconnected and to make sure that they're all enhanced and strengthened so that we can be more resilient.
Where are we missing, or where could the resources come from? Would it, in an industry like this, for example, or maybe they already are, should the big auto companies be funding some of the work on cyber to protect their own supply chain with some of the smaller companies, to your point, the ones nobody's ever heard of and that maybe don't have the resources? I mean, what are we not doing that we should be doing here to protect ourselves from things like this?
Well, one of the things that we see in the public sector, right, with a lot of executive orders in the government, right, they say there needs to be a particular standard of cyber maturity. You know, we're going to need to see that there's a certain level of control in place for your cyber posture, for your security. We're going to need to see a certain level of spend. We're going to need to see that you have training programs, all of these things, and then hold the suppliers to it on a continuous basis. A lot of the cyber stuff is kind of once and done, but it needs to be always on.
That's a good point.
And that's the big change.
It's a good point, yeah, and set some standards. If you want to do business for us, you have to hit these standards. So this is it in autos. It's one thing, but to your point, healthcare, when we saw it, it was a much bigger deal. Thank you, JC Herz, on all of that.